Hi there. What do healing a man from leprosy, feeding the 5,000 and raising Lazarus from the dead have in common? Well, more than you might think. Welcome to Messaging Heaven, our Precept Discovery Study Plus.
All right, it's a free download from our website. Make sure that you've either got a pencil or a couple of coloured pencils as well, because we are going to get interactive with the Bible text. See what we can learn.
Here we go. So, bottom of the page where it says first things first. In Matthew chapter 6, Jesus taught his disciples and said, "When you pray, and pray then in this way." Jesus clearly expected his followers to pray, and the great news is that we can learn how to pray. When do you pray? Or what prompts you to pray? Let's learn from Jesus' example. But how would you answer that question?
Well, I'm going to ask everybody else here, how do you pray? When do you pray? Do you have a set time that you pray? Or is it on an ad hoc basis, or when you're in the middle of a crisis? Just think about that for a minute, and then we'll ask you again at the end what you've learned.
Okay, so the number of passages here, we're going to read them through, and we're going to mark Jesus with a cross, including pronouns such as him or himself. And we're going to circle the word pray and also any other words that are similar to pray. Okay, so here we go. The first one is Luke chapter 5, verses 15 to 16. So get your pens and let's read it carefully, and let's be marking together. But the news about him,
that's Jesus, mark it.
So mark that with a cross, was spreading even farther, and large crowds were gathering to hear him,
Jesus,
and to be healed of their sicknesses. But Jesus himself would often slip away to the wilderness and pray.
All right, so make sure you circle the word pray there.
Okay, Mark chapter 1. And he,
that's Jesus,
healed many who were ill with various diseases and cast out many demons. And he, mark that, was not permitting the demons to speak, because they knew who he was.
Jesus.
In the early morning, while it was still dark, Jesus got up, left the house, and went away to a secluded place and was praying there.
So circle praying.
Matthew 14:23. After he
that's Jesus.
had sent the crowds away, he went up on the mountain by himself to pray.
All right, Mark, pray.
And when it was evening, he was there alone. Luke 6. It was at this time that he went off to the mountain to pray.
All right, Mark, pray.
And he,
Jesus,
spent the whole night in prayer to God. And when day came, he called his disciples to him, so 3 markings there, and chose 12 of them, whom he also named as apostles. Mark 8. And he directed the people to sit down on the ground, and taking the 7 loaves, he gave thanks and broke them.
All right, so gave thanks is that synonymous term. It's another way of saying prayed in this context. So make sure you've circled gave thanks.
And started giving them to his disciples to serve them, and they served them to the people. Luke 24. When he had reclined at the table with them, he took the bread and blessed it.
That might be another word we can circle for prayer. He blessed it.
And breaking it, he began giving it to them. John 11:39 and 41. Jesus said, "Remove the stone." Martha, the sister of the deceased, said to him, Lord, by this time there will be a stench, for he's been dead 4 days. So they removed the stone. Then Jesus raised his eyes and said, "Father, I thank you that you have heard me."
All right, so what are we going to mark there? Well, clearly there is a prayer that Jesus prays, but we can possibly, you could mark the word said, because then Jesus raised his eyes and said, or Jesus raised his eyes and prayed. So we can circle the word said, or if you wanted to, you could just circle that whole prayer.
Okay, so point number 2. Look at where you marked, and by asking questions of the text, see what you can learn from Jesus about prayer. Discuss your answers verbally or write them out below, and you can see a bunch of questions there, which we're going to use to see what we can learn. So first question is, who did Jesus pray to?
Well, we see very clearly in Luke 6 that he prayed to God. And he, in verse 41 of John 11, called him Father. So he was praying to his Father, God the Father.
Okay, so...
That's really important to know.
I think it is. It's very important, because people pray to all sorts of...
different things.
Don't they? But focus on the Lord God. Okay, who was Jesus with when he prayed?
So, going through each of the passages, Luke 5:16, Jesus would often slip away. So Jesus himself went. So it sounds as though he was alone there.
Yep.
And I think we will see that again in Matthew 14, that he was alone. So he prayed alone.
Prayed on his own, okay.
By himself.
Yep.
Who did he pray with, or who was near him? Mark 8 verse 6.
Okay, so we have got, well, the setting you see there is the feeding of the 4,000. So he's with a crowd of 4,000 people, and he's giving thanks. So he's been on his own. He's now with a whole crowd of people. So it's another setting in which he prayed.
Okay.
Also in Luke 24, we see that Jesus is in the town of Emmaus. You may know the story of him being on the road to Emmaus. And he is with these...
the people that he's eating a meal with. So he reclined at the table with them. So
he's with them.
With people who are eating a meal.
And then John 11.
He's by a gravestone. So he's with those who are mourning the death. Martha, the sister of the deceased.
Okay, so different circumstances that who he was with. Okay, so when did he pray? Now this is interesting.
So we see that he prayed often in Luke 5. He prayed early in the morning while it was still dark in Mark 1. He prayed in the evening in Matthew 14. And he prayed when? In Luke 6.
Night.
The whole night.
In Luke 6.
He prayed the whole night. When else did he pray? He prayed when he was about to receive a meal. He prayed before he gave food out. And he prayed before he raised Lazarus from the dead. Yeah. So he prayed on lots of different occasions, lots of different times.
He did. Okay, so where was he when he prayed? Is the next question.
Okay. By the way, these questions are what we call the 5 W's and H questions. They help us to interrogate the text. And you may find that there's an overlap with some of the answers. That's okay, that's fine. But the point is we want to make sure we don't miss anything. So where was he? Luke 5, he was in the wilderness. We see in Mark 1, he was in a secluded place. In Matthew 14 and Luke 6, he's on a mountain. Yeah.
In Mark 8, we know that he's with a whole bunch of people.
Yes. Outside again.
Luke 24, he's at a table.
Yeah.
Giving thanks. And in John chapter 11, he is by Lazarus's tomb. Yeah. So again, he is in a whole lot of different places when he's praying.
But actually, a lot of the time he's outside. He's outside in nature, but he's also at occasions where he's with other people, or inside he's having a meal, or
lots of different circumstances he is praying. So next question is, why did he pray? See the context for clues.
Right, well, if you look at those first 3 passages, there are large crowds who are putting many demands on him. They wanted healing, there was demon possession, there was sickness, and so he was working, really hard. And so why did he pray? I think he prayed because he needed to get time away. He'd given out and he now needed to receive back in again.
Absolutely.
He was pressurized.
Yeah. Luke 6, very interesting. He spent the whole night in prayer to God. Why? Because the next day he chose 12 disciples who named apostles. I mean, that was a pretty important thing that he was going to do there. So he spent the whole night praying to get guidance from God about who he was going to choose, or to confirm who he was going to choose.
And we know that one of them ended up betraying him.
Yeah.
So very interesting. So why else did he pray? He prayed in Luke 24 to bless the food that they were about to eat. Actually, he gave thanks in Mark 8. So there are lots of reasons why he prayed.
Yeah. And to raise Lazarus from the dead.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, how confident was he that his prayer was heard?
Very confident. He said, I thank you that you've heard me in John 11.
Yeah.
Thank you. He knew.
He knew.
Yeah.
All right. Now there's an insight box at the bottom of the page there. Prayer means to pray, to offer prayer. And blessed means to speak well of or to give thanks for. So in Luke 24, where it says he took the bread and he blessed it, he was giving thanks to God for the bread.
All that bread.
All right. So we have seen, we've observed the text carefully. Over the page, we need to now know it, it says, to interpret it. So we're going to look at a different passage here. Psalm chapter 5, verses 1 to 3, and we're going to describe how the psalmist communicated with God by putting a circle around it, and we're going to underline the psalmist's requests. And the psalmist, by the way, is King David. So here we go. Give ear to my words, O Lord, consider my groaning.
All right, so we want to circle the words and groaning, because that answers the question, how did he communicate?
And then his requests in the verse?
Well, give ear to my words and consider my groaning.
Okay, verse 2. Heed the sound of my cry for help, my King and my God, for to you I pray.
So again, the how is answered by he cried out and he prayed.
Any requests?
Yeah, the request is heed the sound of my cry for help.
Okay.
So heed it.
Excellent. Verse 3. In the morning, O Lord, you will hear my voice. In the morning, I will order my prayer to you and eagerly watch.
So the voice is how.
Yep.
He communicated, and prayer as well. Okay. There's no request in verse 3.
So look at your markings. How do they help expand your understanding of what prayer is?
I think we see that prayer is more than just verbal words, because we see words, we see groaning, we see crying, we see emotion here, don't we? It's not just flat, it's quite heartfelt, it's emotional. And also there's an urgency to the way that David's praying. Give ear, consider, heed. You know, he's really requesting and asking for the Lord to intervene, really.
Yeah, and the insight box is really helpful. See, groaning refers to intense meditation or sighing as he cries out to the Lord. So that's where you were talking about the emotion, really. Yeah. Cry means to cry out for help. It's a cry of despair. We see that in verse 2. He cries for help. And pray means to pray or to intercede, to intervene on behalf of others. And
we also see here, prayer is David expected an answer. There's an expectancy with our prayer. He said, I'm going to order my prayer to you, and I'm going to eagerly watch. So there's an expectancy. And again, we see that he's praying to the Lord, to God. That's who he's praying to.
Yeah. Okay, the next question is, what kind of a relationship does David have with the Lord?
I think it's a really intimate one. It's an expectant one. It's an open one. I think it's a trusting relationship.
Yeah. It's also a humble one, because he's a king, and yet he's saying in verse 2, heed the sound of my cry for help, my King and my God. So, there's a humility there. Absolutely. Although he is king, he's praying to the king.
Absolutely.
So yeah, intimate, personal, humble.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, so the last little bit says, live it out. How will we respond to what the Bible has taught us about prayer? What are the things that you have seen as we've gone through these passages that you want to try and remember about prayer?
And then put into practice, apply them. So at the beginning we asked about when do you pray and what prompts you to pray. So what have you seen through Jesus's example and David's example that you can now apply to your life? You can say, okay, it's all right for me to groan, to cry out, or just to be with people in their grieving and just to pray, or to give thanks for food. It might not be your habit before you eat a meal to give thanks, but that might be an opportunity for you to pray and to witness to your faith in Jesus. Yeah. So I think there are lots of things, but we'd like you to think about that so that you take that as a personal application. But for me, I've been really encouraged that we can go to God in prayer. What a privilege it is that we have to be able to pray and to bring all our concerns to him.
In lots of different circumstances and in lots of different places.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, so wrap it up. Whilst this is not an exhaustive study, we have learnt that Jesus often prayed alone and also in public. He prayed after a pressurized time, healing people, or when crowds were demanding his time. He prayed in the morning, in the evening, to give thanks for food and that God had heard him. Prayer can be words, it can be groans, or even cries for help. Yeah. But like David, let us pray with honesty and humility.
So we'd love you to explore our YouTube channel further. There are more videos, there are more free studies that you can download. But why don't you take what you've learned, go away and pray about it, and also see who you can share this with. Because it's a great way of just sharing the good news about Jesus with other people.
Yeah.